Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 17598 in the name of Marie Goujon on empowering Scotland's island communities. I encourage members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Marie Goujon to speak to and move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, around 11 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm glad to open this debate today and highlight the enduring importance of Scotland's island communities and businesses. I want to take this opportunity to outline the work that the Scottish Government has undertaken in partnership with communities, with businesses and local authorities to promote our islands' voices and support their aspirations. In addition, I would like to update the Chamber on the development of a new National Islands Plan and the progress made with the implementation of the Carbon Neutral Islands project. Scotland's islands are an integral part of our national character, and they continue to play a really vital role in how we are perceived around the globe. Island economies combine a mix of tradition and innovation, spanning a diverse range of sectors from farming and crofting to agritourism, food and drink to spaceports, and of course fishing and aquaculture. Now, I know that island entrepreneurialism was rightly celebrated through a recent members' debate, which was promoted by Jamie Halcrow-Johnson. It's only right that we take every opportunity to recognise and champion rural and island businesses and their central role in sustaining our island communities. Next week, we will mark 7 years since the Islands Act was approved by this Parliament. To this day, Scotland remains one of the few countries worldwide with an island-specific piece of legislation. This is something we should be very proud of and continue to celebrate. The Act introduced an explicit requirement for ministers and 70 other public bodies to have due regard for island communities. Island Communities Impact Assessments, or ICIAs, are a formal mechanism to ensure that public bodies island-proof their decision-making by considering the unique circumstances of our islands. Oh, yes.
Douglas Ross.
I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for giving way, because she's speaking about the due regard that ministers must give to island communities. Why then does her motion about empowering our island communities fail to mention ferries?
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, because we're talking about the National Islands Plan, and this is the opportunity for Parliament to feed into that. And I will, of course, come on to transport, which is an integral part of getting to our islands. Now, delivering on another key provision of the Act, Scotland's first ever National Islands Plan was published in December 2019. It was the result of extensive consultation with island communities, and it set out the strategic objectives that have since guided the Scottish Government's policies and investments for islands. In the space of just a few years, we've encountered a really formidable mix of challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the ongoing cost of living crisis, which have impacted our islands significantly. The implementation of the plan has also had to navigate the detrimental impacts of an unwelcome Brexit. As this Chamber has regularly heard me comment, Brexit has had profoundly negative consequences for Scotland's rural and island areas. It has exacerbated labour shortages, created new barriers to trade and stemmed the flow of crucial EU funding. In engaging with successive UK governments, the Scottish Government has consistently championed the distinct needs of our rural and island communities. But arbitrary decisions made by governments at Westminster have compounded the damages of Brexit and continue to cause lasting harm to our island communities. What we witnessed earlier this week is no different. While the UK-EU summit represents positive momentum in rebuilding our relationship with the European Union, I am deeply disappointed by the UK Government's lack of meaningful engagement in general, but in particular on fisheries. This is a devolved area which has a disproportionate impact on island jobs and communities. Now, despite being at the sharp end of Brexit and the other crises I've mentioned, island communities have shown remarkable resilience. This, however, is not something that the Scottish Government has taken for granted. Throughout these difficult times, we've worked with islanders to develop tangible measures and support their economies and well-being. For instance, since December 2022, our Islands Cost Crisis Emergency Fund has helped local authorities support vulnerable households exposed to those cost of living pressures. The fund has already distributed £3.4 million, and I'm pleased to confirm that a further £1 million will be distributed over the course of 2025 and into 2026. Much has also been delivered under the National Islands Plan. Through the Islands programme, we've invested over £15 million in capital for critical infrastructure, addressing locally identified priorities and funding community-led projects. The fund has supported 70 projects across 51 islands, including social care facilities on Tiree, a new nursery in Orkney, harbour facilities on Skye and a community hub on Eriskay. Earlier this month, I was delighted to write to local authorities to confirm that another £5.3 million has been allocated to the Islands programme for the coming year. Now, we know that the delivery of more affordable homes is important for islanders. Between April 2016 and March 2024, we've delivered almost 1,300 affordable homes in island communities. Between 2023 and 2028, we're also making up to £25 million available through the demand-led Rural Affordable Homes for Key Workers Fund, which is available to local authorities and registered social landlords to purchase existing homes where there is an identified need. Yes.
Eagle.
For taking the intervention. I get the point that there is money going into these communities, but does she accept the point that we are still facing critical rural depopulation, and that's because there isn't enough housing and there isn't enough education provision and there isn't enough healthcare provision to keep people on the islands? And how do you think, moving forward, the Scottish Government can fix those points?
Cabinet Secretary.
I am going to touch on that because the member raises a really important point about depopulation, which is a critical focus for us going forward and as we develop the new plan, because it isn't just an easy thing to fix. We know there are a number of contributing factors to that, which is why the work we're taking forward in housing and transport and all these other areas is so hugely important. But I will come on to address some of those points in my remarks. Now, in addition, our £30 million demand-led Rural and Island Housing Fund continues to deliver more affordable homes in island communities, and we have recently announced its extension to 2028 as part of our programme for government. To date, 44% of completed projects supported through the Rural and Islands Housing Fund have been delivered on islands. Each year, we provide nearly £40 million to croft businesses, including through schemes such as the Crofting Agricultural Grant Scheme, which has committed over £31.5 million to help more than 5,000 crofters with their croft businesses since 2015. We've also delivered almost £26 million to help build and improve over 1,160 croft homes, with over 80% of grants being awarded to island-based crofters over the course of 2024. These are just some examples of the projects that have been delivered, and the list, of course, is much longer. But I would refer colleagues to the reports that we have laid annually to update Parliament on investments and initiatives undertaken right across portfolios to deliver on the strategic objectives that we have set out in the National Islands Plan. Now, at the end of 2023, we carried out a public consultation to inform a review of the plan. And I would like to put on record the Scottish Government's gratitude to the many organisations and individuals who contributed to that review. Oh, sorry, I've just noticed the intervention from Fergus Ewing, which I'll take.
Fergus Ewing.
I'm very grateful to the Cabinet Secretary going away. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the lack of local residents from the islands being represented on boards of quangos and public bodies that provide lifeline services, notably HIAL, CalMac and CMAL, means that we lack that local knowledge, which is so important and which could, you never know, actually have helped us avoid the ferry fiasco in the first place had that knowledge been available?
Cabinet Secretary.
In terms of having local voices and in that engagement with communities, I think that of course, is really vital as we're looking to deliver critical services. Now, as I was saying, at the end of 2023, we carried out a public consultation to inform a review of the National Islands Plan. And while the plan was found to be ambitious and comprehensive, those who responded were clear that more needs to be done to improve outcomes for island communities. Now, notwithstanding the fact that the tumultuous times that the delivery of the National Islands Plan has had to navigate, we fully accept the results of the consultation and recognise that island communities continue to face challenges in areas, including some of those we've touched on so far today: housing, transport, access to health and social care services. And I want to stress very clearly that we are listening and we will continue to work with islanders to deliver real improvements. And it's because of that, of hearing what we did through the consultation and reflecting on what islanders have told us, we've concluded that a new National Islands Plan is needed. We've heard that the new plan has to be more targeted, with fewer objectives and an even stronger focus on delivering tangible and relatable commitments. In recognition of the demographic challenges facing many islands, population attraction and retention will be the key and overarching objective for the new plan. Now, I do have to make some progress. We have tested this proposal with island communities and local authorities, and it has received robust endorsement. Commitments featuring the plan will then be geared towards this strategic objective. We also propose having community wealth building as a key principle underpinning the delivery of the plan. Therefore, actions featuring in the plan will be designed to create and retain wealth and well-being locally. But what's key to all of this is that we ensure that islanders are at the very heart of the new plan. We have been engaging with island communities and local authorities to inform that new document, and in-person engagements across island areas are ongoing. And in fact, officials from the islands team are currently in the Outer Hebrides engaging with those communities directly. I'm sorry, I am approaching the end of my comments and I do need to progress. Now, while the new National Islands Plan takes shape, our determination to continue addressing islanders' challenges and ambitions is already fully reflected in the latest budget and programme for government. And on transport, we've introduced free inter-island ferry travel for all residents of Shetland, Orkney and the Outer Hebrides under the age of 22 and extended the free travel voucher scheme. Another key project that I did want to turn today and to address is, of course, the Carbon Neutral Islands project. Now, the Scottish Government continues to take its climate obligations seriously, and we recognise that our islands are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Now, from the outset, communities have been central to that project, and we've directly supported the employment of community development officers to lead that delivery on the ground. There have been several key achievements to date, but to build on these early successes, we've worked closely with island stakeholders, with Highlands and Islands Enterprise, to develop a financing roadmap which is being published today. And that sets out a range of initiatives currently in development, and will continue to invest in the islands with a further £1.6 million of capital allocated this financial year. Presiding Officer, this Government is committed to working with our island communities to deliver on their priorities. The next iteration of the National Islands Plan will build upon that progress that's been made to date. But with any work we undertake, whether it's the development of the new plan, the Carbon Neutral Islands project or all other activities I mentioned, we are deeply conscious of doing things with and not to island communities. I look forward to the debate today and to continuing working collaboratively to deliver the positive change for our islands. And I therefore move the motion empowering Scotland's island communities in my name.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Just a reminder to anyone who's looking to participate in the debate who hasn't yet pressed the button to press the request to speak. And I now call Jamie Halker-Johnson to speak to and move Amendment 17592.2 around 7 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'll move the amendment in my name so I don't forget later. As my party spokesman on islands, as convener of this Parliament's cross-party group on islands, and of course as an islander myself, I'm delighted to open today's debate for the Scottish Conservatives. I don't think people really understand island life and its challenges unless they live on one. And that's particularly true, it seems, for the Scottish Government. Now, I appreciate the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary, want to talk only about positives today. Their motion makes that very clear. But I'd like to focus on the challenges of island life and of running a business on our islands, and where the SNP could and absolutely should be doing a lot better, where in too many cases they're failing islanders so badly. For those colleagues who came to the Island Showcase I hosted in Parliament last month and the Cabinet Secretary mentioned, you'll know that our islands are all different. They have unique characteristics and unique challenges. But there is a common thread of problems which many of them face, highlighted by our amendment to the Scottish Government's motion today. Colleagues will concentrate, I'm sure, on a variety of areas of concern: the challenges of supporting education and learning in our island communities, the growing pressures on health and social care, where far too many people are left without the care they need or left waiting for treatment, or they can't access a GP, where increasing numbers of services are available only online, but broadband connectivity won't support that, or farming on our islands, as we do, where costs can be significantly higher. But these are just some of the issues islanders and island businesses face. But probably the most high-profile issue is around ferries, because that is one of the most serious challenges we face on our islands, both now and into the future. There is a crisis in our ferries network. Between 2015 and 2024, the number of ferries cancelled due to technical faults on the government-owned West Coast routes rose by 531%. In 2015, technical faults only accounted for around 1 in every 10 cancellations. It is now almost 4 out of 10. Our ferry fleet is ageing and increasingly unreliable. But this worsening crisis, while largely on the West Coast for now, is a threat to services across Scotland. Island councils like my own in Orkney and our friends a little bit further north in Shetland operate internal ferry networks which keep our island communities connected. But our fleets are ageing too, with replacement costs likely to run into the billions of pounds. Of course, there have been talks between island leaders and Scottish ministers. There are always talks. The government do love talking. But we still don't have a definitive timetable, cost projections or funding commitments which cover the entirety of what needs to be replaced. So when I look out of my home, in the window of my home in Orkney and see the nearly 30-year-old Hoy Head ploughing through the waves of Scapa Flow, what confidence can I have that she will be replaced when she needs to be and not be forced to plough on as growing technical issues risk her reliability? Well, given the SNP's record with the over-budget and delayed Glen Sannox and Rhoda, not a lot. The SNP ferry fiasco, scandal, Burke, delete as appropriate, means no islander, except perhaps the most loyal SNP supporter, has any real confidence in this government getting on top of the problem. In Orkney, we're fairly lucky with our ferry links with the mainland, operated by Northlink ferries and by Pentland ferries. And I would suggest that's not entirely unconnected to the fact that SNP ministers have no direct control over the operations of either company. Ahead of the Island Showcase I mentioned earlier, I hosted a number of roundtables on various different subjects with attendees from across our island communities. It was extremely informative, but what I think was most striking was that virtually every issue came back to a lack of housing in our island communities. That impacts on people being able to stay on our islands and bring up their families. It stops much-needed public sector workers, teachers, nurses, police officers, taking jobs on our islands and ensuring vital services are delivered locally. It means employers simply don't have the accommodation for staff, often severely impacting their businesses and even their viability. Scottish ministers have failed time and time again to come anywhere close to the solutions we need. And this isn't rocket science. We just need to build more houses. And even when Scottish ministers say they're doing something, the devil is in the detail. The Cabinet Secretary mentioned earlier the Rural and Island Housing Fund, but they spent £100 million of that money building new city developments. And between 2016 and 2021, the dedicated Islands Housing Fund delivered fewer than 20 homes. Added to this, for many of our smaller island communities, the cost of private bills can be 30% higher than on the mainland. Meanwhile, planning restrictions continue to be a barrier for many. And regulatory burdens are a real issue for our tourism sector too. But instead of reducing burdens, this government has forced even more new taxes and new regulations on what is such an important sector for our island communities, one still recovering from some tough years. They've been hit time and time again by this regulation-daft government. Short-term lets licensing has seen costs rocket for accommodation providers, forcing many to close entirely. And they're now threatened with the introduction of the visitor levy, the SNP's latest tax, one so badly thought out that in the face of widespread anger and opposition, SNP ministers have said they're already looking at amending it, or they claim they are. But the visitor levy is not just a tax which hits our tourism sector. It's one that risks disproportionately hitting islanders too, including those who have to travel for medical appointments and need to stay overnight, or families visiting their patients in hospital. I would ask the government front bench, is that fair? Was that even considered as the bill was developed? And is that really island-proofed? Presiding officer, many island communities feel increasingly detached from central government and the decisions supposedly made on their behalf. They don't have confidence that ministers and officials really understand or care about the impact those decisions will have on their lives. There is a feeling that when ministers talk about island-proofing, what they really mean is island box ticking. Our islands deserve better than a Scottish government that legislates from Edinburgh and Glasgow as though the Central Belt is the only place that matters. I'm an islander, and I and my party know both the challenges and the opportunities of our island. The Scottish Conservatives will always stand up for Scotland's islanders, island businesses and our island communities.
Thank you. I now call Rhoda Grant to speak to and move Amendment 17598.1. Around 6 minutes. Ms Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our islands are wonderful places, and I'm honoured to represent all but 2 of Scotland's populated islands. Each island is different. They have a different personality. But all islanders have something in common. They're resilient, self-sufficient, quick to help and support others in their community. That is the reality of island living. The Island Scotland Act 2018 built a level of expectation that's sadly not been met. The promise that policy would be island-proofed and that islanders would not be disadvantaged due to where they were born or where they'd made their home. The hope was that legislation would help build island economies and also stop depopulation, but sadly that has not happened. Our amendment points to examples: HPMAs, the ban on wood-burning stoves, the Island Bonds Plan, and there are many other policies that have been designed with no knowledge of islands or their needs. We need a rural-first policy approach where every policy is tested in rural or island communities to ensure that there are no unintended consequences and that these policies are designed for our island communities. We know that policy designed in rural and island areas work well in urban settings, but the opposite is not the case. Government agencies ignore their obligations under the Islands Act and don't carry out island impact assessments. Decisions such as the closure of tourist information offices obviously detrimental to island communities, but no impact assessment was carried out. The communities of Mull have expressed concerns about the new school campus, and their concerns have been absolutely ignored. This, of course, is an issue for Argyll and Bute Council, who should be subject to the Islands Act and should be island-proofing this policy. But it's also an issue for the Scottish Government, who will be providing funding for the campus. They could step in to ensure that all islanders' ambitions are met. It's surely wrong that children are being forced to leave home to access education today in a modern Scotland. This is a huge disappointment to islanders. Legislation could have been a game changer, making little or no difference to their lives. Very quickly.
Tim Eagle, briefly.
I missed it if you said it, but I was just wondering if you would join me in welcoming the residents from the island of Mull here today in the gallery who are listening to this debate and are probably very interested in what you're talking about.
All through the chair. Rhoda Grant.
Yes, I'm happy to do that, and hopefully the Islands Act will make a difference, because the government could intervene even at this stage to ensure that their views are heard. It's disappointing as well that no progress has been made on 11 out of the 13 objectives in the National Island Plan. And I would have to say I'm at loss to understand which of the 2 objectives has seen any progress at all. We then come to ferries, essential for island communities, yet we have simply seen growing disruption. Government have failed our islands by having no ferry replacement plan, and they only started a replacement programme when the crisis was looming. The building of the Glen Sannox and the Glen Rosa have been a disaster. The cost to the public purse of building these ferries should have replaced the whole fleet if it had been efficiently managed. The cost to our island communities is incalculable, and the shortage of ferries, as is the shortage of ferries, given that the ones we have are old and break down regularly. I'm struck, speaking to business, that they're surviving only through sheer determination. If their DNA had not been island, then they would have upped and left to places where they did not have to struggle with constant disruption. The same is true for those who need to access health and care off island. The stress of being unwell, added to the stress of trying to access care with the backdrop of failing ferries, is incalculable. These issues are crucial to islanders, yet we do not have adequate representation of islanders on the boards of High Calmac and Seamal. The insinuation is clear that islanders cannot manage their own services, but we all know High was never so proactive as it was when Sandy Matheson chaired the board. Islanders are by nature seafarers and would make a better job of running ferry services than those who have never set foot on an island. The Scottish Government have promised resilience funding, but we need to know the detail of that and how it will protect businesses going forward. And as we've heard, ferries are not just a problem in the Clyde and Hebrides. Orkney and Shetland inter-island fleet is even older, and it doesn't even provide reasonable disabled access. These councils can't afford to replace their fleet, and they need help from the Scottish Government to access capital to allow them to do that.
Minister.
Thank you very much to Rhoda Grant for taking an intervention. And you've just pointed out the fact that these ferries our local authority responsibilities, but does the member accept the fact that, particularly in Orkney just now, we've got some very good news going on with getting the inter-island ferries, the Zevi ferry in particular, replaced in Orkney?
Rhoda Grant, I can give you the time back for the interventions.
Yes, and indeed, after many years of trying to get help from government, some is now forthcoming. But it's late, and it needs to happen a bit faster than it is at the moment, because it's not one ferry they need. They need the whole fleet replaced to bring it up to date, because it's really not acceptable for people with disabilities not being able to access the ferry. Presiding Officer, we should make sure we're never in this position again. Our islands have so much to offer. They provide the green energy we need. And when we perfect wave and tidal energy technology, that will be even greater. We have EMEC in Orkney, which is at the heart of that. And indeed, the Heriot-Watt University sent a briefing talking about their work and their concerns about the future, given the funding pressures on further and higher education. Basically, all of this is crucial not only to the well-being of our islands, but to the well-being of our whole country. We need to provide homes for young people to live. Young islanders are being forced out of their communities due to the lack of affordable housing. And while I welcome things like Key Housing Fund, it doesn't help those young people who are already there. People with capital can come in and outbid them, meaning they can't stay anymore. In health and local government, we have the distant island allowance for workers, but colleges, for example, don't get this as part of their funding package. If they pay it, it makes them even more financially precarious, but not paying it means their staff are worse off than their mainland counterparts. Presiding Officer, I could go on, but the Scottish Government could and should take steps to deal with those issues. I urge them to do it, and I urge them to empower our island communities. I move the amendment in many.
Thank you, Ms Grant. I now call Ariane Burgess. Around 4 minutes. Ms Burgess.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I just want to extend my apologies to everyone in the Chamber for being late to this debate. I'm really grateful that we're here today discussing and debating the need to empower Scotland's islands, something that I've recognised over the 4 years and a bit that I've been in this role, is that Scotland is not an island nation, it's a nation of islands. And as colleagues have already said, every single island in Scotland is different and unique, and that's been an incredible thing for me to really understand, from travelling from the southern tip of the Western Isles to the northern in my very first summer recess, and travelling to Orkney and Scotland in that same summer recess. I took on a lot of islands and really saw the difference. And something I really want to convey to this chamber is that it's fantastic that we have had power devolved to Scotland, and we've got that power. But what I want to see is that we have power devolved to our island communities at the most local level. If communities are going to tackle the climate and nature emergency, they have to have that power in their hands. And as I've just said, each island is different and they face very different circumstances. Uist is like when I went up to the top of the tiny little hill in Benbecula, looking down over the sunlit water. Uist is like fragile lace laid across the Atlantic Ocean, and they are looking at being completely overtaken by flooding in the not-too-distant future, and having to look at how they're going to handle our housing and rehousing people. So I want to see us really looking and getting to a point where we are designing Scotland with islands and rural communities first, that we need to start to think about policies perhaps that are different for island and rural communities than other parts of Scotland, urban parts of Scotland, because we have very unique, different circumstances. So from that, I'm going to go back to my notes. So Scotland's inhabited islands are at a critical point in their 5,000-year history, having supported communities since at least the late Stone Age. And the effects of climate change and depopulation could bring their long human history to an end in many places. Rising sea levels, increasing extreme storms, and the unpredictability of our weather patterns could push island populations to the brink over the next few decades. Their resilience to what is likely to be significant change has been undermined by years of little recognition and support from the UK and Scottish governments, and this has already damaged the social fabric of islands and communities. by drawing young people and local talent away to the Central Belt and beyond. And the Scottish Government has started on its journey towards rectifying this situation, and I do welcome the policy efforts, particularly the Islands Plan and the Carbon Neutral Islands project. And I've gone to meet a number of the Neutral Island project teams, and it is fantastic that the work they're doing, and it is great to see that the government is recognising the need for multi-year funding on that project so we can really roll out what they're doing to other communities. And these are good starting points to address the challenges presented by climate and depopulation. But we do need to see more changes being delivered more rapidly. And this was highlighted by the Scottish Human Rights Report, which was released last autumn. And it's simply unacceptable that government policy isn't delivering on the most basic human rights obligations in relation to islanders' rights to housing and food. And I hope the mooted New Islands Plan, which the Cabinet Secretary discussed earlier, leads to better delivery than the last one. It's encouraging that the Cabinet Secretary's motion does acknowledge that more needs to be done. Presiding Officer, how much time do I have?
4 minutes. It's a generous 4 minutes.
Okay, a generous 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm just going to close with a couple of comments. I'm sorry, I'm not going to take the intervention, Mr Lumsden. Just on the Rural and Island Housing Fund, it's really welcome that that has been reviewed and been extended. But I think there's a number of things that we need to recognise there. One is that there is a fund there, but low uptake because there's a high bar of actually accessing it due to the feasibility study. So I think we need to look at that, because if we don't have housing, we're going to have nobody on islands, and we're not going to be tackling the climate emergency or doing anything with economy. And I think the other point that we need to be looking at is, if we are going to give communities a rural and island housing fund money, we need to actually build in resource for the communities that don't have wind energy that supports that resource, that person, to deliver the plan. And we need to be really thinking about building at scale in terms of housing and creating a pipeline. So cutting the Rural and Island Housing Fund on and off, or making it questionable whether it's going to happen, breaks that system when we need to be building at least 11% more housing in Scotland, Scotland's islands.
Thank you. I now call Beatrice Wishart, again around 4 minutes. Ms Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I agree with the deserved recognition of the invaluable contribution of each of Scotland's islands to the country's economy, culture and identity. From a Shetland perspective, I have repeatedly said that we punch well above our weight, and on numerous occasions highlighted that, like other islands, there needs to be much more infrastructure investment to enable islands' viability and contributions to Scotland, as the limitations of infrastructure to address geographic situations is a serious barrier to growth. I'm grateful for the advanced sight of the Carbon Neutral Islands financing roadmap, though the slightly inaccurate description and spelling of Uphelia in the document leapt out at this Shetlander and is perhaps an unfortunate start. The Carbon Neutral Islands, or CNI project, worked with the innovative and proactive North Yell Development Company, which has unfortunately now stepped away from the project, and I was disappointed by the feedback from those involved locally. I understand there have been concerns about pitting the islands in the CNI against one another, overly ambitious timescales, technical complexity and viability of projects, but reaching our net zero goals should bring communities along across Scotland. The financing roadmap also references low-carbon transport solutions, including increased vehicle charging infrastructure, yet the national grid is not in a position to manage increased demand. The irony is not lost in Shetland, where we see the Viking wind farm reportedly generating as little as 17% of its capacity and being paid enormous sums to constrain production, as the energy infrastructure is not considered able to cope with higher generation. Our ferries, both the internal and external services, are ageing and often at capacity, preventing island residents from going about their daily business, either unable to get in and out of the islands internally or access the overnight external ferry service on a date that they require. As an example of the pressures on the internal service, on Monday a constituent waited in all day for an engineer to swap out his RTS meter. The engineer didn't turn up because they'd failed to book the ferry to the North Isles, and there was no spare capacity on the crossing. Freight in and out of the islands is also constricted simply by the capacity on vessels on the Northern Isles route. With investment in short subsea tunnels, not only would there be freedom of movement between islands, cutting commuting times for those who work on mainland Shetland, our seafood sector would benefit with quicker transport of time-sensitive products to catch the external ferry for their exports. Tunnels for Shetland would connect communities and ensure that cultural pursuits are not limited by the last ferry home. Decarbonisation and emission reductions in ferry transport would be welcome, and while tunnels won't work for all islands, they would for others, and not just in Shetland. The motion references the Islands Act of 2018, which had the serious intention of empowering islands and giving island councils greater flexibility over public services. There is still a debate to be had on its achievements, as I often hear constituents asking, "Where's the island proofing?" when any new legislation is brought forward, or when island communities' impact assessment outcomes reach the conclusion wanted by the organisations carrying them out, barking their own homework, in other words. The Scottish Parliament Information Centre found that the Scottish Government does not appear to have a record of how often it undertakes island impact assessments. Moving now to the development of the National Islands Plan, a number of community engagement events across the Isles has attracted responses. I would be very surprised if many of those contributions did not reference measures to address depopulation, including transport and digital connectivity, childcare and housing, which should be the key themes of the new plan. Investment in housing would ensure that those looking to make a life in the Isles, to fill the many vacant posts in education, care and the NHS, and young islanders wanting to return home after time away can find somewhere to live. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Wishart. We now move to the open debate. I call first Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Pam Gosnell, around 4 minutes. Mr Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I was pleased to hear Beatrice Wishart talk about tunnels, having visited the Faroe Islands and seen how wonderful their tunnel network is. I do certainly think the Scottish Government should do more to explore the possibility of tunnels for some of our archipelagos. I have the privilege of representing the most beautiful of Scotland's 93 inhabited islands, Arran, Cumbria and the Holy Isle, and it's a pleasure to debate empowering Scotland's island communities today. Islands hold a special place in Scotland's culture and our collective imagination. Writing in the British Journal of Photography in 1885, Sherlock Holmes writer Arthur Conan Doyle dubbed Arran as the epitome of the whole of Scotland and said, "Nowhere can the wandering photographer find in such a small compass so many varying beauties upon which to exercise his skill." It was Nairn, while navigating the ridge between Ben Tarson and Kirmore, that outdoor writer and broadcaster Cameron McNeish decided to dedicate the rest of his life to climbing mountains and exploring wild places. And Nairn can even claim influence in rap, with the musician Loyal Carner claiming his breakout single Isle of Arran in tribute to the island and its deep personal significance. Yet despite the reverence with which our islands are held and their mammoth cultural footprint, they face challenges that can seem invisible to those on the mainland: depopulation, housing shortages, fragile transport links and the high cost of living. The Island Scotland Act 2018 was a watershed moment, and Scotland is one of the few countries in the world to have created island-specific legislation. Embedded island proofing in the formation of policy and legislation. The first National Islands Plan, introduced a year and a half after passage of the Act, set out 13 strategic objectives and 134 specific commitments aimed at improving the quality of life for Scotland's island communities. The sheer volume of commitments must be addressed in the second National Islands Plan. The majority of individuals and organisations who respond to the Scottish Government's consultation on the first National Islands Plan believed the number was just too high. The next plan should prioritise and deliver on a tighter focus of commitments, especially since islanders themselves don't feel enough progress is being made. If we take transport as a chief strategic concern, work to purchase Ardrossan Harbour and redevelop it to accommodate the MV Glen Sannox and MV Glen Rosa is crucial. The Government's intention to bring the harbour into public ownership is enormously welcome, but must be matched by delivery. Of course, there have been successes in ferries. For example, the introduction of road equivalent tariff means that for my constituents, ferry fares are actually cheaper now than they were 18 years ago, despite high inflation over that period. And that's meant more visitors to the islands, of course. And indeed, if we think about ferries, I remember the second ferry in Arran to Arran in the summer of 2007. I was elected, was an old tub called the Saturn, where 15% of all sailings were cancelled because of breakdowns, and it only ran for a few weeks, whereas now they have a second ferry for 6 months. It's not all been bad news. But more must be done to empower our island communities in relation to those ferries. And as Fergus Ewing touched on already, it's widely recognised that the lack of islander representation on CalMac, CMAL and David McBrain Limited board suits no one. They fuel perceptions that these organisations are detached from the islands they exist to serve and lead to poorer decision-making. Again, despite being campaigned on for years, progress on improving islander representation has been limited at best. On Cumbria, why has the community had to fight off a short-notice attempt by CalMac to overturn a summer timetable which had been in place for more than 40 years? And I thank the Cabinet Secretary for Transport for, within a week, reversing CalMac's unilateral decision. Why, when the community expressed a clear preference of returning to a system of return-only tickets for the sake of speed and efficiency, does CalMac refuse to listen? And regarding Holy Isle, the peace and tranquillity of the Buddhist convent there is under threat from proposals by Forestry and Land Scotland, a Scottish Government agency, to industrialise the area around King's Cross, across Lamlash Bay, with an unwanted timber export facility. No one locally supports the plans for King's Cross, and the strength of feeling against this project cannot be overstated. Island communities face stark demographic challenges. The number of people 65 and older in Arran has increased by 38% since 2001, whilst the working population fell by 17% and children by 37%. Arresting such trends requires more affordable housing, such as the £2.38 million provided by the Scottish Government to build 34 council houses in Brodick, and the Arran Development Trust Riverdene project, a shining example of the possibilities. With £1.512 million from the Scottish Government, 18 affordable houses have been built and allocated, 3 of them just this week, allowing people to stay, work and thrive on the island. Crucially, Arran Development Trust did this with a proportionately much lower central government grant and other island housing projects, providing a possible template for other affordable housing projects. Presiding Officer, our islanders are central to Scotland's identity. The Islands Act and the National Islands Plan has enhanced their focus on them. Nevertheless, when it comes to empowering islands and delivery, we must go further and faster.
Thank you. I now call Pam Gossel to be followed by Fergus Ewing. Around 4 minutes. Ms Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today I stand before you to discuss the importance of empowering island communities in Scotland. These communities, often isolated and facing unique challenges, are vital to the cultural and economic fabric of our nation. Empowering them means ensuring they have the resources, infrastructure and support needed to thrive. Islands play a valuable role in our economy through tourism, agriculture and fishing. Tourism alone generates £10.8 billion, supporting thousands of jobs and local businesses. However, under the SNP government, these communities have faced significant challenges, such as limited access to healthcare, education, transportation and housing, which have hindered their growth and development. I visited Cumbria in November 2023 while serving on the Local Government Committee. The lack of access to reliable ferry services was one of the main concerns of residents. It's astonishing that, despite the SNP's promises, local businesses and job prospects are withering away due to the dire state of transport. Transport is not just a convenience for islanders, it's their lifeline. Have I got time to take that?
I can give you time back.
Kenneth
1,100
Gibson. People live on Cumbria and there are 40 sailings in each direction per day, one every 15 minutes in summer timetable. How would you increase that or improve that?
Through the chair,
every 15 minutes.
Well, I thank the member for that intervention. But what I did was what probably the SNP need to do. I went out and listened to the people, and that's what the people were telling me. I went out in the local government committee. So maybe the SNP need to go out and listen to the people on the ground. The same sentiments emerged while speaking to council chief execs in island councils when I served as the Scottish Conservative spokesperson for local government. Time and time again, the SNP have demonstrated an appalling inability to address the basic needs of people they claim to represent. The Isle of Arran. In my West of Scotland region is a perfect example of the SNP's betrayal. The contract for Glen Sannox and Glen Rosa was awarded to Ferguson Marine in 2015, with both ships originally due for delivery in 2018. The Glen Sannox, which serves the Isle of Arran, entered service early this year, almost 7 years later than initially scheduled, and even had to be pulled out of service a couple of months later after its first setting off sail, as a crack was found in the ship's hull. As for the Glen Rosa, we found out last week that its delivery will once again be delayed. At the same time, the costs of delivering both ferries have spiralled from £97 million to an upwards of £460 million.
Unbelievable.
These are shocking figures, and taxpayers are the ones footing this bill. This is yet another catastrophic blow from my island constituents, who have been betrayed at every turn by the SNP's incompetence. The Deputy First Minister said that there can be no more delays. Yet her boss, the First Minister, could not even say what the final cost will be to taxpayers for the corrupt ferry contract that he personally signed off. Yeah. Our island communities would have been much better off if that money would have gone to public services instead of down the drain.
Yeah.
Just do it at the end.
Point of order. If you resume your seat, point of order, Stuart McMillan.
Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, is it in order for any member in this chamber to make such a scurrilous accusation about, and I'll use the word corrupt, that the member has just indicated? There has been absolutely no proof whatsoever of any contract being awarded that was allegedly corrupt, as has just been indicated.
Thank you, Mr McMillan. That is not a point of order. I didn't deem anything out of order. I will deal with the point of order, though, Mr Ross. I do not need assistance from you. Pam Gosal, continue, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Locals in Ardrossan have protested about the series of expensive blunders which have plagued the launch of the 2 new ferries to Arran. The 30-year-old ferry serving the islands for generations is failing, and 2 new bespoke design ferries are too big for the Ardrossan Harbour jetty. The SNP government are now considering buying Ardrossan Harbour. This follows widespread concern in Ardrossan that the Calmac service might not be switched back from Troon permanently. In closing, Presiding Officer, it is disappointing that the islanders have had to endure years of being at the centre of this ferry fiasco. Yeah. Challenging is one of the more polite words you would hear from a lot of people speaking on Arran, and how life has been over the past few years. I hope the SNP government get their act together, accept blame for their failures, and take clean action to tackle all these challenges.
Thank you. I now call Fergus Ewing to be followed by Claire Baker. Around 4 minutes. Mr Ewing.
Presiding Officer, like my late mother, Winnie Ewing, I am a survivor of the Uphelia, except I think she attended it on 10 occasions, showing quite exceptional stamina. Unlike my mother, I cannot claim the unique achievement that she frequently professed she had gathered, which was to visit in her 5 decades as a parliamentarian every inhabited island around Scotland. But I have, in 14 years as a minister, as I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary Ministers have, enjoyed greatly working with officials and businesses in the islands, and I hope we've achieved things, but that's for others to judge. So also, there's a very interesting book that should, I think, be required reading for any minister and possibly MSP. It's called The Blunders of Our Governments, and it's by 2 distinguished professors, Sir Ivor Crewe and Professor Anthony King, and it catalogues the blunders made by the Westminster government. It was written mostly prior to devolution, and that included the poll tax, for example, which was devised by a group of rather posh Conservatives. And as one civil servant put it to them, whose advice was ignored, good luck with that down Brixton way when it comes to collection time. Now, the point is this, that the professors identified the problem as being the extent to which policy development got separated from the realities of the world. They called it operational and cultural disconnect. That the people in charge of making the policy have no connection with the people who are affected by the policy. And that is the point I wish to make in my remarks, Presiding Officer, That is something that could and should have been corrected, and it's sad that we haven't corrected it as yet. I think we should have. And as Kenneth Gibson said, that is placing islanders at the heart, not just of operational decisions, but policy strategic decisions. And that means mandatory places on the boards of those public bodies that are charged of delivering the lifeline services, principally but not exclusively High Isle, Seamal and Calmac. There should be people from the islands on every one of these boards. The boards are quite small in number, 5 or 6. There's no reason why they couldn't be expanded to have, say, 4 or 5 people from the islands. And that would give them, as John David Pedorana said, that without the influence of islanders on these public bodies controlling island services, the current depopulation trends will accelerate. And I also should mention a long-standing campaigner and friend of mine, Brian Wilson, the former Labour Minister, who said this in a recent article: "The central issue is about control. It's about the who-whom relationship between Edinburgh and communities served by Calmac. At present, this is conducted through a tripartite arrangement with Transport Scotland as puppet master, Seamal as procurement quango and Calmac as operator. It has been an unmitigated disaster." And I repeat that had there been islanders, would we have seen the ferry fiasco? Would they have said to me, as Captain Ian Dewar did in Lochaber back in the 80s, they build the wrong ferries because they don't understand how they work? I think that's a very strong case. The civil servants are in charge of the selection policy, and far from me to attack civil servants who can't defend themselves. But I do think that their role is too powerful, that they guard their powers as determinedly as squirrels hoard their nuts for winter hibernation. It's got to change. There should be islanders on the selection panel of chairmen of all these bodies. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, in the short time I have, we've got a proto-colonial approach. If, as the Cabinet Secretary says, people are to be at the heart of the plan, they have to be in the room. And as the election looms ever closer, I do hope that all the parties, particularly the main moderate parties, not the two extreme ones, will put in their manifesto that there will be islanders on these boards, and that change will be introduced in the first 6 months of the next session of this Parliament.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. I now call Claire Baker to be followed by Colin Beattie. Around 4 minutes. Ms Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As has been said this afternoon, Scotland's island communities are a vital part of our national fabric. They are home to rich cultures, unique environments and resilient people. They contribute significantly not just to our heritage but also to our economy. Yet for far too long they have been let down by government policy that fails to meet their needs or match their ambitions. In 2019, the National Islands Plan was launched with great fanfare. It was meant to be a turning point, a strategic framework to improve outcomes for islanders across 13 key objectives, from housing and connectivity to economic development and depopulation. But the review and consultation report published last year painted a concerning picture. On 11 of the 13 strategic objectives, a majority of respondents believed that no progress had been made at all. Only 28% of respondents said the plan had affected their life in any way. This is a scathing indictment of a plan that was supposed to bring transformative change. Equally alarming was the widespread lack of awareness and engagement. A quarter of respondents either knew nothing about the plan or had heard of it but knew nothing of its content. A further 52% only knew a little about it. This lack of awareness is something that has to be addressed with the new plan. To empower island communities, they should be informed, interested and invested in the process, and without that, it is little surprise that outcomes have fallen short. The consequences of government inaction continue to be felt in real and painful ways. As others have said, depopulation remains a threat. Young people struggle to stay or return because of the shortage of affordable housing, the cost of building and the lack of access to reliable healthcare, childcare and other key services. These challenges are pushing people away and undermining the long-term viability of island communities. We must also talk about ferry services, lifeline links that islanders rely on for work, healthcare and access to markets. The disruption and delays caused by this government's failure to deliver a reliable ferry network have had significant consequences for families and businesses. Earlier this year, the members' debate, led by my colleague Rhoda Grant, focused on the SHRC Spotlight report into rights in the Highlands and Islands. A report which highlighted the failures to deliver adequate services and the impacts of centralisation, as well as some of the key challenges for those in our islands, for example, food supply, healthcare access and the lack of affordable housing. We need to bring services to people rather than expecting people to navigate impossible distances and systems to access their basic needs. Food costs more on the islands and independent shops struggle to compete on scale. As we saw recently with the cyber attack that left the co-op on Isla bare, the impacts of supply issues on island shops can leave communities vulnerable as there's nowhere else for them to shop. But alongside these challenges, there is also innovation and strength. Employment rates on many islands are higher than the national average. Community-led cooperatives can offer sustainable economic models rooted in local needs. We should support these models to foster local ownership, to invest in infrastructure and to make housing genuinely affordable for young families and key workers. The Scottish Government blamed a succession of crises, COVID, Brexit and the cost of living, for the failings of the first National Islands Plan. But crises are not an excuse. In fact, they should have been a catalyst for urgent action. What islanders now need is not another overly ambitious document, but a new plan that is clear, measurable and island-led. Presiding Officer, before closing, I want to recognise the vital contribution of Rhoda Grant MSP for being a strong voice for the Highlands and Islands over a number of years and wish her the best for the future when the time comes where she is leaving Parliament next year. And also, now that the Cabinet Secretary has announced her intention not to stand for re-election, I would urge her to now cast a critical eye over the SNP's legacy of the Highlands and Islands, wherever she now wishes to employ her considerable skills. Presiding Officer, we need to listen to island communities, not just in workshops, but in the design, funding and governance of the services they rely on. Let us ensure that the next National Islands Plan is not another broken promise. Let it be the foundation for lasting, locally driven change, so our island communities can not only survive but thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Baker. I call Colin Beattie to be followed by Douglas Ross.
Presiding Officer, I am pleased to take part in this debate to highlight the importance of our island communities and the challenges they face, but we must also recognise their unique opportunities. And I would like to note that the introduction of the Islands Act that gave communities specific legal rights to Scotland's islands to ensure that the Scottish Government works with and for the residents. Thanks to the Islands Act, all relevant authorities now must complete an island community impact assessment, and this ensures islanders' unique concerns are carefully considered. If we want these communities to thrive, we must listen to the experts, those who live there, and act on their concerns. National Records of Scotland estimates that the island population has increased at around a third of the rate of the whole Scottish population. Between 2001 and 2020, Scotland's population increased by 7.9%, compared with the island's growth of 2.6%. Now, we need to understand why this is happening and how we can help residents remain in their communities. Now, that doesn't mean that those who do move towards the Central Belt always wish to do so, and I'm sure there are countless who feel they have no choice due to multiple factors, including housing, employment and transport. But I'm pleased that the Scottish Government has recognised these issues and are acting to remedy them. With housing, the Scottish Government are delivering affordable homes across Scotland, with the majority for social rent, and a £30 million rural and island housing fund offering capital support for local organisations and developers to deliver affordable housing. A thriving economy is key to not only supporting jobs for islanders, but also in attracting new residents to live, work and raise their families there, to boost the population in future generations too. As I mentioned at the start of my contribution, our islands have unique challenges, but also unique opportunities. Our island communities can and should be a major part of our response to the global climate emergency, and I am pleased that the Scottish Government recognises this and are committed to the innovative carbon-neutral island projects to support communities in several areas, not just in decarbonisation. The Scottish Government is acting and are delivering several infrastructure projects that will deliver jobs and be of great benefit to the wider community. We have the Renewable Hub in Orkney, supported with a £5 million grant. The Scottish Government backed Deepwater Terminal in the Western Isles, supporting future renewable energy developments. And these projects empower the local community to be at the forefront of an energy and economic boom. Whilst a thriving economy enhances our island communities, we can't ignore culture, which so enriches our country. And it's vital we continue to support the Gaelic language. It's a fundamental part of Scotland's heritage, and I'm pleased that the Scottish Government is supporting our ancient language. The Ceilidh House in Stornoway will receive £10,000 to enable it to promote Ceilidhs and live music events in Gaelic. The Gaelic Media Service in Stornoway will be modernised using £110,000 of Scottish Government funding. But of course, we also need to ensure our island communities are connected through efficient transport services. We need to acknowledge the lifeline nature of our ferry system, and the Scottish Government hasn't got every aspect of this correct. However, we should acknowledge that the ferry services now are more extensive than before the SNP came to office. CalMac are now operating and servicing more routes than ever before. Everyone can agree that improvements are vital, and I would certainly encourage the Scottish Government to work with our island communities to match their needs. In conclusion, the Scottish Government does have plenty to be proud of, but more can be done to truly empower our islanders to thrive within their communities.
Thank you, Mr Beattie. I call Douglas Ross to be followed by Claire Adamson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Only in SNP Scotland can we have a debate led by SNP ministers around an SNP-drafted motion on empowering Scotland's island communities that doesn't mention ferries once. Not a single mention in their motion. And I'm sure I can't be the only one that did it, but if I am, I'll just explain to the Chamber. I counted how many words were in the motion. There are 109 words in the SNP motion about empowering our island communities. And in 109 words, they congratulate themselves. They say how great the SNP are with the islands and for the islanders, but they don't mention ferries. And it got me thinking, how could that motion even have been signed off by highly paid ministers? The two on the front bench today get a combined salary of £216,700. Over £215,000 the two of them get every year. And when an official handed them the motion, did they not say, this is going to look a bit embarrassing if we don't even mention ferries? But no, they rubber-stamped that and allowed it to go. And I think it shows, frankly, the ignorance that these SNP ministers have for the real hard life of islanders and the impact of ferries and the delays and the lack of ferries for so many of our island communities. And then what do we get today? What's the response to the problems in our islands? Another islands plan. And I say this to the Cabinet Secretary because I tried to intervene, but she wouldn't take the intervention. Does she really believe, with all this engagement she's doing, that islanders want another island plan? No, they don't. If they were given the choice, they would want a bloody ferry. That's all they're after. That's all they need.
Mr Ross, courteous language, please.
I was being courteous. That's the most polite thing I've heard about.
OK, Mr Ross, you will not repeat that word and you will apologise for the use of it in this chamber.
Well, I'll apologise just because that's your ruling, but I have to say that is...
You will apologise because that is my ruling. Now, yes. Continue with your speech, Mr Ross.
I literally just said that, but I'm saying that language is the mildest people in our island community speak about when they're talking about ferries. If you think that is, discourteous to this chamber, just listen to what the islanders are saying. And the fact that these ministers can bring forward a debate celebrating what they are apparently doing and ignoring the impact of the lack of our ferries in these communities is shameful and something that I hope they regret. And on these ferries, we've also had defence from SNP members today that we can't call these contracts corrupt. It can't be anything other than corrupt if these ferries are years late, if they are hundreds of millions of pounds over budget. And just in the last week, we've been told another £35 million added on to an already huge bill. This morning, the Public Audit Committee was looking at this, and my colleague Graham Simpson was asking a Scottish Government official, I think at Director General level, what will this mean? Where is that money going to come from? So far, no minister has been able to tell us where this additional £35 million is going to come from. Is it going to come out of the Rural Affairs and Islands budget? Is it going to come out of the health budget or the education budget? We don't know. We have no answers, but we were told there would be difficult trade-offs. So I don't know if the Cabinet Secretary can tell us, have they had discussions in the Cabinet yet about these difficult trade-offs? Will it come out of the Rural Affairs budget again? They're pretending to be speaking about something really important. I think this is really important and they should be addressing it. Finally, Presiding Officer, I'm in my last minute and we've heard more than enough from Stuart McMillan today. Gosh, no, I would, if I have a choice to hear or not hear from Stuart McMillan, I'll go for the choice of not hearing from him. But I want to finish by commenting on an article today in the Herald from Callum Steele. And Callum Steele is speaking about the challenges for our island communities with the lack of ferries. And he ended his column with this. And these are his words. When successful award-nominated businesses simply cannot afford to open, as the lack of footfall makes it economically illiterate to do so, you begin to understand why South Uist is one of the most economically disadvantaged areas in the country and faces a depopulation crisis that is amongst the most acute anywhere. He finishes by saying this, and I hope these words will be ringing in the ears of the SNP ministers, because he says, little wonder its residents have dripping contempt for those who talk about delivery whilst being complicit in its neglect. I think that sums up the situation with the SNP, the ferries and our islands very well, Presiding Officer.
I call Claire Adamson to be followed by Alec Rowley.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm afraid I have probably one of the most landlocked constituencies in the country, but nonetheless, I absolutely adore our islands. I don't have the perseverance of Mr Ewing's mother or himself in touring them, but I have spent many wonderful holidays and many trips with this Parliament on committee business to our islands, not least of which to Jenny Minto's lovely Isla, which was our last trip. And if I say to Ms Wishart, I'm really sorry, I certainly would have trouble spelling a lot of the place names, but I'll probably mispronounce a few as well, so my apologies in advance. But I have to say, the elephant in the room in this debate isn't ferries. It was mentioned by the Minister, it is Brexit. We know Brexit had a negative impact on Labour in our island communities. We know that it's created new barriers for trade and that we lost EU structural funds, which had been absolutely violent. No, thank you. I'm sorry. I've heard enough for the Conservatives this afternoon, and I'm sorry that's not directed at you. That's directed at your colleague. So we know we just have had the EU summit, and we look forward to seeing how that might help in what we are doing. However, there is absolutely no doubt that the biggest blow to our island communities was Brexit and the loss of those EU structural funds. And the Highlands and Islands have benefited considerably from European structural investment funding in the past 4 decades, and this has been transformational. The impact in terms of improving infrastructural connectivity and strengthening communities. We wouldn't have a University of the Highlands of Islands and its expertise across our islands. We wouldn't have it if it hadn't been for the European Union and the funding that came to create it. It supported infrastructure projects, community initiatives in the country in the 1970s, with Scotland receiving and delivering more than £6 billion transformational projects, such as the University of the Highlands and Islands and the European Marine Energy Centre in Orkney. We have been investing in our islands. We have been looking to the future for reducing carbon emissions and looking to renewable energy, both in our island waters and with wind technology. This has been absolutely vital for a lot of the issues that have been discussed. And while housing is absolutely essential, what we also have to remember is we have to make it a place that people want to live, want to work. We want high-paid, highly skilled jobs available to the young people. And we also want to give them the opportunity to see the world, but come back and return and build in their own communities. How much has that been damaged by Brexit and the inability of our young people to travel abroad? And there's also been much talk about the cultural input, no, I'm sorry, a lot of the cultural exchange that happens and the festivals, and I know we only need to look to some of the music festivals that happen in Orkney, then how disappointing that in the reset of this relationship with the EU that we don't have access to Creative Europe, which would have helped a lot of our cultural folk festivals and our folk artists to be able to tour the way they did when we had free movement of people in Europe. So if I have to say anything this afternoon, it's while I welcome the initiative and the plan, and I'm really glad that the Government is putting that out for us all to discuss today, the best plan for our island communities is an independent Scotland back in the heart of European nations.
I call Alec Crowley, the final speaker in the open debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I live in Kelty and I represent Mid-Scotland and Fife, so you might say, well, what does he know about islands? But like Fergus Ewan, I have survived up Helia more than once and had brilliant times staying on Bressie and enjoying the nightlife in Lerwick. So I do understand that island life can be different. My family lived on Bressie for many years. The costs can be far greater, and that's without having some of the problems that we've had recently. But we do have some things in common with the Central Belt and the islands, and one has, since this Parliament was established, so over a number of different governments, different political parties, we have seen a centralisation of powers coming from local authorities, local communities, into this Parliament and into the Scottish governments. As I say, successive governments, different parties. And that has to be reversed. A number of people have touched on that today. Ariana Burgess rightly highlighted that. Fergus Ewan's highlighted the Quangos, Calmac, other Quangos in these areas. And we need to be able to address that. My favourite holiday destination is around the Oban area. And there's nothing more exciting for me than getting a ferry across to Mull, going to Iona, and being able to do that. And it will never cease for me to be so amazing when you go on that ferry and you start to see the islands. I only wish more people for the Central Belt of Scotland would be able to experience the islands. Sometimes the costs are far too great, I would have to say, for people to be able to use the islands as a holiday. It's like the Highlands. Sometimes it's cheaper to get an all-inclusive holiday abroad than it is to spend a week in the Highlands. So these are issues for I think, the whole of Scotland. I certainly, as a youngster, never experienced the islands at all. And when I did, as I say, have gone back time and time again. Housing is absolutely a major problem for the islands, the Highlands. Depopulation, if you cannot tackle housing, we know that immigration supports jobs in the Highlands. Over the many years that I've holidayed in the Highlands, I have met families that have come to Scotland to make it their home and work there, but they've not been able to get a home. But it's the poor. You know, I like the comment from Jamie Harker-Johnson when he said that island proofing is island box ticking. Absolutely. Consultation over a new islands plan. Don't consult over a new islands plan. Allow the people of the islands to start to develop and write that plan, but then give them control over the implementation of that plan. But in the short time I have, I wanted to highlight, I don't know if members on here saw STV News last week, where they ran a piece and said that families were heartbroken after plans to expand an island's only care home were scrapped. Funding to expand the number of beds in Thompson Court, the only care home on the Isle of Bute, has been scrapped amid funding concerns. Plans to expand the number of beds at the only care home on the Scottish island have been abandoned. Families on Bute are struggling to care for loved ones with complex dementia needs, having to send them to the mainland. And by the mainland, they talked about Stirling, Fife, and then people having to go and try and visit their loved ones and everything that was involved in that. Not just the cost, but for elderly people, that level and amount of travelling. In October, Argyll and Bute Council announced the funding to expand the number of beds from 8 to 14. But those plans have been scrapped due to an overspend on social care costs. The Integrated Joint Board say they are extremely disappointed, but they cannot proceed blaming the costs that far exceed their budget. That is a ridiculous position for that island to be facing, and it's something that this government and this Parliament should be looking to how we actually address that and we fix that. So for me, it is about giving power to the islands, power to communities, not just sitting on the quangos, but these IGBs, sitting and making the decisions, coming up with the plans on what the islands need. That's the way to proceed. Otherwise, we'll keep coming back here and having the same discussion.
Thank you. We move to winding up speeches, and I call on Ariane Burgess.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's debate has clearly shown the strength of passion and feeling and support for empowering our island communities from all sides of the chamber. Ferries and tunnels were mentioned by a number of members, and Beatrice Wishart made a good case for fixed links in Shetland. There are a number of obvious places where fixed links make sense, not just in Shetland, and it would be good to see the Scottish Government undertake work for the feasibility of this important infrastructure. On ferries, it was good to see the Scottish Government take up the Scottish Greens call for free inter-island ferries for young people under 22. And this currently only covers Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles, and it would be good to see this extended to young people living in islands like the Summer Isles, for example, or for young people travelling from islands like Islay and Tiree to the mainland. Kenneth Gibson spoke of the need for islanders to be involved in decision-making about their ferries, and it is astounding that this has clearly been an ask since long before this session. As a candidate, I learned that communities in Ullapool and Stornoway asked for 2 smaller ferries, but they ended up with 1 larger one, which results in a lacking service through limited sailings. If islanders had been on the board, different and better decisions would have certainly been made. Claire Baker pointed out the lack of awareness of islanders about the island plan and the outcomes, and how we need to bring services to people rather than people to services. And this picks up on what I said in my opening contribution. We must start designing policy with islanders and rural communities. So with them, not for them, so that it works for them to ensure that island communities thrive. Housing has come up across the chamber from a number of people today. Colin Beattie also talked about the Rural and Island Housing Fund, and it's clear how vital that fund is, and essential that we listen to communities who understand how we can make it work even better. And Claire Adamson spoke about the elephant in the room, the challenges brought by Brexit to our island communities through the loss of the EU Structural Fund, and that is certainly the case. Wherever I go in the Highlands and Islands, the ring of EU golden stars on blue background is ubiquitous. Brexit also brought a great deal of red tape and paperwork to our small artisanal fishers. I think the government's announcement of the next phase of the Carbon Neutral Island Scheme is a step in the right direction when it comes to empowering islanders. It's good that existing projects will be able to look ahead and plan for the next 3 years. But given the Carbon Neutral Islands initiative is already delivering a tangible impact for communities, I would urge the government to go further, faster. By the time this new roadmap draws to a close, it will have been 7 years since the project was launched, and the other Scottish island communities won't be any clearer on how this project could help them on the road to net zero. It's imperative that we don't get to a situation where there's inequality of opportunity between our islands, and that all islands have an opportunity to participate with enough time, so that they can hit the carbon neutrality that we are seeking by 2045. If we can get it right on the islands, we can get it right anywhere in Scotland. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we also need to see more decision-making taking place in local communities, so that islanders feel like they've got a real stake, actually beyond feel, that they really do have a real stake in their communities. We've already seen the consequences of not doing this on Mull. The island communities have been badly divided by the decision to build a new school campus in Tobermory. People living in the north and south of the island have been left completely at odds, because a decision was made that didn't put Mull front and centre. It has left children in the south needing to spend most of their term time in mainland hostels, completely contravening their human rights and threatening their well-being. We need to avoid scenarios like this, where decisions are being made for islanders rather than by islanders. So I will conclude once again by calling for this chamber, for this government, for this parliament to be designing with islanders, with our rural communities, rather than for them. Let's put islanders first.
Thank you. And I call on Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, there are risks as well as opportunities set out in this afternoon's government report. There are roadblocks on this roadmap, and they are listed. Grid connection challenges, barriers to raising capital, funding delays and risks, shortages of labour, including of local tradespeople, skilled labour, insufficient local contractors, and the persistent concentration of land ownership question. All are set out clearly in this report. Now, in my view, these are not insurmountable, and I was reminded just last night that 70% of the population of the Western Isles now live on estates, on land which are community-owned. Gear, Egg, Ulva are thriving in community ownership, and there is a cooperative tradition on our islands. So a community wealth-building approach, which we haven't really heard of this afternoon, properly supported, properly resourced by the Scottish Government, could work. And I would just say, look at the magnificent employee-owned Ochrani Resort on the Isle of Arran, as an example. And there have been cries this afternoon of islanders on the boards, led by Fergus Ewing, but echoed by other speakers, Claire Baker included. And I think that they are right, and it's a perfectly reasonable demand to make. But as Alec Rowley reminded us, simply having people on boards is not of itself sufficient. There needs to be a much greater level of islander engagement in decision-making. We know as well that there are still some old challenges to be overcome, illustrated all too vividly recently by the actions of the Clandonald Lands Trust on the Isle of Skye. And so, as the Labour amendment points out this afternoon, island depopulation persists, and we now have a statutory island-proofing policy. We've passed a law, but is it working? Kenny Gibson described it as a watershed, but as Beatrice Wishart reports, recalling evidence from Spice, there is no record, no data of island impact assessments being carried out. The Conservative Party amendment this afternoon refers to the excellent Scottish Human Rights Commission Spotlight report into the Highlands and Islands, which concluded, and I quote, "Across all rights examined, there is not a single human right that meets all the conditions of adequacy under international law. Not one. Not one." But I hope that the Conservative members of this Parliament, not all of them wearing a blue rosette, understand that we will address address these fundamental breaches of human rights, the rights to health, to social care, to education, to be free of fuel poverty, the right to culture, to a home, the right to food, the clear breach of which is causing hunger, deprivation, even malnutrition on our islands in 2025. I hope that they will understand that we will never address all of these breached rights for as long as the rich remain so rich, because that is why the poor remain so poor. As many people have said this afternoon, Alec Rowley included, it is surely a central job of this Scottish Parliament and of this Scottish Government to focus on what is distinctively Scottish. And nothing is more quintessentially Scottish than Scotland's islands. And nothing is more important and necessary than a reliable transport service, a reliable ferry service, connectivity on and off our islands. And yet this government cannot even get that right. As Rhoda Grant said, ferry disruption is growing, and the government has only belatedly responded when there is a deep crisis. So 18 years in office, now 10 years since the bidding process closed on the 2 new ferries for the Clyde and Hebrides routes. In August of this year, it will be 10 years since the then First Minister jumped the gun, pulled rank on the then Minister for Transport and the Islands, and announced the award as a done deal on a visit to the Ferguson Marine Yard, even though, I quote, significant negotiations were still to be concluded. I will, Mr Gibson, yes.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the member for taking intervention. Is it not the case that all political parties supported the award of that contract in 2014, and what we have heard today is all about hindsight?
Richard Leonard.
No, it's not hindsight at all. When the Public Audit Committee of this Parliament looked into what happened around the award of the contract, they heard clear evidence that the First Minister stepped in at a point when the buyer, CMAL, the procurer, CMAL, were not happy with the terms of the deal. And so it's my contention, and I think the contention of the committee at that point, that the announcement was a premature announcement, and that's not the benefit of hindsight. Now, I remain an inveterate and an unrepentant socialist, and I'm convinced more and more that what we need is a social and an economic, not a constitutional revolution, a challenge to landlordism, a revival of crofting, a redistribution of wealth and power, instead of the perpetuation of this wholly unequal distribution of economic power and this wholly unequal distribution of wealth. And I'm convinced that all the people want from us as members of this Parliament is for us to act humanely, decently and democratically in the best interests of the people who send us here, including all of those who live on our islands.
Thank you. And I call on Tim Eagle.
I have to be honest, Presiding Officer, when I first saw this debate, I thought to myself, wow, this is brave. On the same week as we'd heard about another massive delay and spiralling cost to the Glen Rosa, and on top of concerns I was already aware of around school campuses, healthcare and rural depopulation, here, to my great surprise, was a debate being led by the SNP, talking about how we empower Scottish islands. Now, it is true that our islands contain many wonderful people. Islanders are often very resilient, engaging, and there is much good work that goes on in our islands, and I share a desire, probably the only desire I share with the SNP, to make sure our island communities are empowered. But are we really doing it? The Minister talked about new carbon projects on the island, the successes of the National Island Plan. But I noticed the motion from the SNP does admit that further action to tackle island challenges is needed. That's quite the understatement, in my opinion. You can say a lot in a plan, but a plan in itself is not the provider. It is where we choose to invest and support that makes a difference to the lives of our islanders. I have yet to go to an island where ferries are not raised, and yet, as Douglas Ross rightly points out, the SNP today doesn't mention it at all. The First Minister and Deputy First Minister both admitted last week that ferry delays are not good enough. It isn't good enough. To be honest, I don't think it's good enough that the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister say that line. It is their job to make sure that this does not happen, and yet time and time again it does. Island community impact assessments offer an opportunity to ensure the implementation of new policy really does make practical sense for the islands. Yet the message I too often hear is that they don't, with many feeling authorities do them because they have to, rather than because they see value in them. It was really interesting to listen to the wide range of views in the Chamber today. Jamie Halcrow-Johnson and Pam Goswell both mentioned ferries, the future of services on islands and job prospects in tourism. Rhoda Grant, I thought, gave quite a well-rounded speech covering a wide range of issues that matter to our island, including the point I made there about island community impact assessments. Kenneth Gibson told us that the islands are the epitome of the whole of Scotland, quoting Arthur Conan Doyle. He is right. It is elementary, my dear Cabinet Secretary, that the islands are the epitome of Scotland, and we should be serving them well. They are a microcosm. Beatrice Witchart talked about innovative solutions to islands, such as tunnels schools and the requirement for more housing, although did give a bit of a telling off around the spelling of Uphellia. Ariane Burgess talked about the uniqueness of our islands, the importance of devolving power to our councils and island communities, and talked about a critical point in its 5,000-year history. Fergus Ewing said islanders should be at the heart of operations that affect them. We shouldn't have to wait for the next Parliament for islanders to be on the boards of groups which are giving their daily lives. He talked about the blunders of government and the book. It's a book I have read a part of, not in all. I did hear they were going to do an update to that, I think, but on the Scottish Government, but it was going to be too heavy to lift, so they had to stop. Douglas Ross, the SNP didn't like what Douglas Ross had to say. I'm not greatly surprised by that. But he is right, and when I go to the islands, and I have been to quite a few recently, this is what they are talking about. Not surprisingly, what we heard from the SNP today is Brexit, Brexit, more Brexit, Brexit. It's not Brexit that is causing the problems on our islands. The ferry delays are because of the Scottish Government. The housing delays are because of the Scottish Government. It is not Brexit. The only person that talks more about something is Richard Leonard, where he blames the rich for always being at fault. But I respect that, Richard Leonard. At this point, Presiding Officer, can I again welcome the residents from the island of Mull to the gallery today. It's wonderful that they've come across. They have managed to get a ferry across, and I hope they can manage to get the ferry back home today. The Mull School project is a classic example for me of where things go wrong, when we truly don't listen to and empower our island communities. But it's not too late, and I do think, in all seriousness, there is something we can do around this. Now, I tried very hard during the debate and discussion around the Mull School project to not form an opinion on what the right location was for a new school campus, because I felt quite strongly that ultimately the location of a new school is the decision of the community, and I do believe it fundamentally is. But I was conscious, of course, there would be families in Tobermory that would prefer the school to be rebuilt there, reducing the need for their children to travel. But I couldn't help but recognise, and I think Ariane Burgess and Rhoda Grant touched on this as well, that for the whole island to be successful, it was vital all were listened to. Now, time and time again, I was contacted by people across the island that raised concerns about the process of consultation, because ultimately, and this is my own opinion, the financial impact on the council was a much bigger consideration for councillors in Argyll and Bute than what the residents of Mull thought themselves. And that's the problem. 98% of Scotland is rural, 17% of the population of Scotland lives in rural areas. But it's not just about numbers. Rural life is built into our very cultural heritage, with traditions and languages and history baked into our national identity. And rural services delivery does come with a higher cost. But if we want rural areas to thrive, we want our islands to thrive, we must accept that point. Education, like on Mull, that relies on ferries and weather and the separation of families, to me is never a good thing. Mull required a bespoke arrangement. It needed community, government and council to come together to agree a funding package that delivered for the island in both primary and secondary education and provided that equity in education provision. The specific nature of the debate to a fragile community like Mull, for me, necessitated the involvement of the government in order for the right decision to be made. I still believe there is time for the government to act, to support those in the gallery today and the whole community of Mull, and I urge the Cabinet Secretary to take that point back. Big changes won't happen overnight, but more and more we discuss depopulation in this chamber and how to stem it. I do wonder if the lack of any real empowerment is the driver that leads to further depopulation of our islands, just like in the case of Mull. There might be a handful of successes that I could agree with the Cabinet Secretary on, and a few pieces of work that are welcomed by the islands. But are they really empowered? I say to the Minister, go to the islands without an agenda. Sit down and have a coffee, go into the pub, talk in the local shop, talk to islanders about education, about health, about the visitor levy, about fisheries. And if you're really brave, talk to them about ferries. Then come back to this Parliament and stand up and tell me that you really believe our island communities are empowered. Because my own feeling, just like Kate Forbes and John Swinney on ferries last week, is what this government is doing isn't nearly good enough.
Thank you. I call on the Minister to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to say a few words and to bring this debate to a close and reflect on the contributions of other members of the Chamber today. And it's clear from what we've heard that there is a strong consensus about the crucial role that islands play in enriching Scotland's economy, culture and society. And it is indeed vital that we continue across the chamber where we can to support our island's aspirations and make sure that their voices continue to be heard. Now, Jamie Halcroft-Johnson and Claire Baker both made very good points. Jamie Halcroft-Johnson actually said that all we wanted to do is talk about the good stuff. We don't. We want to talk about everything so that we actually find solutions for the island community, and that's what this debate is about. So the Scottish Government's decision, made in partnership with the communities and the local authorities, to touch on Alec Rowley's point, this was very widely consulted on. It was to have a population retention and attraction as the overarching objective of the new National Islands Plan, and stands an unequivocal evidence of our commitment to build a vibrant future for our islands. Of course, the vision has got to be backed by actions and investments. And in her opening remarks, the Cabinet Secretary provided an overview of some of the initiatives that the Scottish Government has already put in train. It's also worth mentioning the support that the Scottish Government has provided for island tourism, with a non-domestic rates relief of up to 100% for hospitality businesses on islands continuing into 25 and 26. I'm also proud of the fact that the Scottish Government's commitment to invest up to $700,000 in the island's games, which will get underway in Orkney in July. It will be one of the largest sporting events ever held in our islands, and I wish that everyone involved very well, and I hope to see Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles teams very high up on the medal list. Through the I certainly will, yeah.
Share my disappointment that over many, many years, Arran and Cumbria have been denied entry to those games because they say they're full up.
Minister.
That will be an issue for the games organisers, I would say. Through the Scottish Languages Bill, we are strengthening Gaelic education and elevating the role of community development through the establishment of the areas of linguistic significance in places where the language has particular strengths. This will, of course, include many island communities. As members know, agriculture and crofting are very close to my heart. And as well as cultivating the land and tending stock, crofters contribute to protecting island biodiversity and play a key role in maintaining their community's heritage and resilience. And through the Crofton and the Scottish Land Court Bill announced in the new programme for government, we will help Crofton by streamlining administrative processes, facilitating the use of in-by-croft and common grazings, and making regulations less onerous. And to touch on Tim Eagle's point, in order to get to the point where this crofting bill takes shape properly, I spent days on the islands talking to crofters, talking to local communities to find out what it is that they want to do. So with crofting at the centre of our island communities, the bill is designed to strengthen and support the sector and the crofting communities for future generations. The examples that the Cabinet Secretary and I have offered are a testament to the Scottish Government's ongoing efforts to address island challenges and their ambitions. But we do recognise that there remains more to be done. The new National Islands Plan offers a vehicle to strengthen our delivery for and with the island communities further. Consultation events held to date have shown a strong support for a plan that takes a hands-on and targeted approach. And in line with the respondents' advice, and I say advice advisedly, the new plan will feature fewer objectives and commitments compared to the 2019 document. The focus will be on a narrower set of tangible and relatable actions that add to what the Scottish Government is already delivering. We're working openly and transparently with partners to address the islanders' expectations and to ensure that the plan features impactful commitments. The suggestions raised during today's debate will help us to shape the development of the plan, so I'd like to thank the members again for their valuable contributions. So when Ariane Burgess talked about human rights, the Equalities Minister has responded to the Commission, copying this to the Equalities Committee and the Rural Affairs Committee, setting out what action we are taking to address the issues that was raised by Ariane Burgess. Sorry.
Alec Crowley.
I thank the Minister for taking intervention. I wonder, will the Minister and Cabinet Secretary make representations to the Health Secretary regarding the position of the Isle of Bute and the care home that was highlighted on STV last week, given it's an unacceptable situation?
Minister.
I seem to have lost my speech, Presiding Officer. Thank you, Matt. I think the member behind me, Jenny Minto, is actually taking that up, and there has been work ongoing with that. Beatrice Wishart, talking about spelling on Uphellia, I think this is a point well made, but I think it was a point that was shared with Shetland Island Council and nobody actually picked it up. But I'm going to leave that Beatrice Wishart also, she talked about tunnels, and we're taking the consideration of what that looks like further. I have to point out there are mixed views on that, so we're going to be happy to continue to have that discussion. But we're also committing over £70 million for inter-island connectivity. Fergus Ewing and Kenny Gibson both talked about having board representation for island communities. So CalMac has a community board. NHS Highlands chair is an islander, but the points are well made, and not just on where they live, but the language that they speak as well, as noted by Colin Beattie. I think it's important that the language is recognised as much as anything else. Ferries. Douglas Ross has made a fair point about the fact that this doesn't, when I say a fair point, he made the point robustly that this didn't talk about ferries. So I'm going to talk about ferries. There's £530 million will be invested over the coming year. The contract is signed for 7 new electric ferries. When added to the Sanix and the 5 new major vessels joining the fleet, that will mean we will have invested to renew over a third of CalMac's fleet. And our budget of over 25-26 confirms that we plan to do more. And I'd like to commend Fiona Hislop for the work that she has done in driving this forward. Talking about Mr Ross, yet again, he shows what a loss he will be at this chamber, and I'm sure it will be improved enormously by his absence next year. As far as number 6 is concerned, talking to islanders is at the heart of everything that we do, Presiding Officer. I would have to mention the residents of Mull and recognise that they are here today and that their issue has been raised with the Cabinet Secretary. But this is a local authority issue, and I'm pleased to say that Jenny Minto has agreed to meet them and is organising a round table to discuss the issue that's been raised. So the voices of our island communities, their knowledge and insights must be our guiding principle. And I'm therefore very encouraged to progress with the progress made with the implementation of the Carbon Neutral Islands project. It offers an example of the results that will be achieved when communities are empowered to take action in a way that is efficient and appropriate to local circumstances. The finance and roadmap that we've published today sets out the next steps in the journey towards achieving net zero emissions by 2040 and moving the project into a new phase of delivery. So the Carbon Neutral Island project also confirms our island credentials as places of innovation and entrepreneurism. And in fact, its islands are often at the centre of Scotland's ambitions, from the production of renewable energy to the transition to net zero to iconic food and drink exports, and that spans the globe. Now, I welcome today's debate as an opportunity to reiterate the Scottish Government's steadfast commitment to listen to the island voices, work across the sectors and ensure that island communities and businesses maximise their potential to prosper. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate on empowering Scotland's island communities. It's now time to move on to the next item of business. The next item of business is consideration of business motion 17607 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme, and I call on Martin Whitfield to move the motion. Sorry, I'm just going to ask for Mr Whitfield's microphone.
Sorry.
Do please continue, Mr
I'm grateful,
Whitfield.
Presiding Officer. This motion presented by the Bureau is, of course, for business that has been considered and is going to be proposed. I'm content to take an intervention for some 30 seconds, if the Minister is able, to facilitate the passage of time, but notwithstanding that, I move the motion in the Bureau's name, and I'm grateful, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Whitfield. The question is that motion 17607 be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of business motions 17608 and 17609 on a stage 2 timetable for a bill. I ask any member who wishes to speak to the motion to press their request to speak button, and I call on Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motions.
Moved, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motions. Therefore, the question is that motions 17608 and 17609 be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motions are therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of 3 Parliamentary Bureau motions, and I ask Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move motions 17610 on committee membership, 17611 on committee substitute and 17612 on designation of a lead committee.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on these motions will be put at decision time, and there are 4 questions to be put as a result of today's business. And can I remind members that if the amendment in the name of Jamie Halcrow-Johnston is agreed to, the amendment in the name of Rhoda Grant will fall. The first question is that Amendment 17598.2 in the name of Jamie Halcrow-Johnston, which seeks to amend Motion 17598 in the name of Marie Goujon on empowering Scotland's island communities, be agreed. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow access to digital voting.